What is the most basic command of the spiritual life? What does everything really boil down to? Well, Jesus lays it out for us pretty clearly. In Matthew 22, a Pharisee asks, "Teacher, what is the great commandment in the law?" And he said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind." That's it. The basic command is to love God and to love neighbor. And we've discussed in other sections of the Science of Sainthood the powerful role of love to literally divinize us, to give us a literal participation in the divine life of God. But one of the obvious questions that arises when talking about love is how? How do we actually love God with all of our heart and mind? And what does that look like? Well, as always, Christ provides the answer. Love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. Put simply, love means sacrifice. We are supposed to lay down our lives for God and neighbor. Now, that doesn't mean we're all destined to be physical martyrs. That's the calling of a select few. But all of us, says St. Jerome, are called to what he identifies as a white martyrdom or spiritual martyrdom. Let's not think that there is martyrdom only in the shedding of blood, says Jerome. There is always martyrdom. And I know that sounds a little scary, but he's basically making the same point as Jesus Christ, that true love of God and neighbor consists of self-sacrificial love. But you can't live a truly sacrificial life, a life of true love, without practice. And let's be honest, we all know this. Just about everybody but puppy-love-smitten teenagers have figured out that love doesn't consist of a few butterflies in the tummy. Now, that doesn't mean feelings aren't a part of the process. Obviously, they are. But we all know those feelings come and go faster than fashion lines out of France. And yet, at the same time, love is not just a decision. Again, that's part of the process, but it can't be totally reduced to an impulse or act of the will. True love is acquired over time and engages your whole life. We can only acquire the ability to love like Jesus Christ through repeated, patient, constant effort fueled by God's grace. As we've said so many times in this series, everything is a matter of grace. He chose us in Him before the foundation of the world, that we should be holy and blameless before Him. In other words, sanctity is a gift. Now that said, we have to cooperate with this gift given to us by God. And that's where the main topic of this section, virtue, comes into play. It's through virtue, the habit of doing good, that we grow in our ability to love God. Just as mastering a musical instrument requires constant practice and repetition, the key to the spiritual life is repetition as well. Repetition of good actions produces virtue. Repetition of bad actions produces vice. So-called willpower, it's not magic. You don't just wake up one day and decide to compete in a triathlon taking place the following week. You work up to it over a long period of time. First you walk for a few minutes, then you jog, then you run and bike and swim like a crazy person. It's all about repetition and practice. That's how you develop the habits you need to compete and finish. And as you develop the good habits, you crush bad ones. Instead of coffee and cigarettes for breakfast, you eat steel-cut oatmeal with organic almonds and dried cranberries. Again, it happens through repeated good acts, which form good habits. And after a while, the good habits are no longer hard, so to speak. You start to crave them and don't even want to go back to the bad stuff. It's like when you start to eat healthier food. After a while, you don't even want to look at a Twinkie because you know that left alone, that thing could outlast most civilizations. Well, it's the same with virtue. Once your good habits become ingrained, you recognize the value and fruit they bear in your life, so you desire to do them. Now, the word virtue is related to two Latin words, vir and vis, which mean man and strength, respectively. A man's real strength, says theologian Father Juan Luis Lorda, resides in his virtues. Now, why is this the case? Well, because virtue leads to freedom. You see, good habits help us assert control over ourselves. While vice robs us of power by diffusing it like an old flashlight, when the beam is so weak you can't see anything, virtue concentrates the beam like a laser. It gives us focus and control over our intellect and will. That's why we call it willpower. Remember, as we've gone over in previous lessons, the intellect and will live in the upstairs part of the soul. And if we've gained some control over the intellect and will, then we've gained control over the passions and emotions that live in the downstairs part of the soul too. So willpower is basically the strength we attain after continued repetition of good habits, which lead to virtue. And again, virtue leads to freedom because it gives us control over our actions. We gain the ability to do the good that we want and need to do. And notice I said the good we want and need to do. Lots of people think that they're free because they can do whatever they feel like. This is the misguided view of freedom that the world is constantly shoving down our throats. Do whatever you feel. Be whatever you want. Be true to yourself. That's not freedom. It's slavery. You're allowing yourself to be ruled by your feelings. Maybe the worst piece of advice I've ever heard was when Obi-Wan Kenobi told Luke Skywalker, "Trust your feelings." That is really bad spiritual direction. In order to be truly free, we can't let our whims and emotions wreak havoc in our lives. And again, it's not that emotions are bad. They're good, but they have to be controlled. They have to be tamed like a circus lion. Virtue provides strength to take control, so we become spiritually focused and powerful. It gives us the freedom to achieve our spiritual ideals. You simply can't fulfill the basic command of God to love like Jesus Christ without virtue.